This is My Legacy. In this week's bonus drop, Nikole Hannah-Jones looks back on the New York Times' 1619 Project, the Pulitzer Prize-winning work that reframed America's story. Joined by her husband Faraji, she reveals her fight for pro-democracy journalism and how she is raising her daughter to stand tall in today's climate. Let's jump in.
Nikole, obviously there was incredible love for this project, but also fierce political pushback. But what was the most surprising outcome, and what's your greatest disappointment?
Everything about how this project has gone into the world has shocked me. I didn't do this project because I thought it would, go on to become this cultural phenomenon that it has, that it would turn into two best-selling books, that it would turn into a 6-part documentary series, that it would have, a life where 6 years later, I'm still constantly talking about it. This was just a project that was on my soul to put into the world. And Fraji would tell you, the night before it published, I was a mess because I had somehow convinced the New York Times to put all these resources to the blackest thing they have ever published. And I didn't know how people would respond to it. I didn't know if we would have used all those resources and people would engage with it the way that I hoped. So everything, the good and the bad, and we focus a lot on the criticism, but again, I know what this project has meant to Black Americans. I know what it has meant to people who are not Black, and I know that if so many people hadn't had their eyes opened, were not willing to embrace and question, you wouldn't see the attacks. You don't attack things that are insignificant and not having impact. So I've been surprised by everything that has happened. My greatest disappointment, I think my greatest disappointment is not so much about anything directly related to the project, but really just in how little pushback and how much capitulation and acquiescence we are seeing to the national attacks on our history. Just how, some of the most elite institutions in the country right now are simply folding. They are not fighting back. They're not using their resources. And it makes you realize how much of what came out of 2020 and all of those connections that people were making was just performative. So I'm not disappointed really about anything. Even the attacks on the project don't disappoint me. But just the lack of defense of Black writers, of Black histories, of the ability to tell our stories honestly, and for upholding values of diversity and inclusiveness. And I'm not talking about some corporate DEI structure. I'm talking about the actual values of diversity and inclusion in a multiracial democracy. That's been my greatest disappointment, is the silence.
Nikole, you founded the Center for Journalism and Democracy at Howard University. And this is incredibly important right now, especially when you seek to train journalists, when you have said eloquently that truth and journalism is under attack. How are you creating that, what you refer to as that firewall in our democracy through journalism? And how are you inspiring the next generation of journalists to maintain that firewall?
So I founded the Center for Journalism and Democracy, of course, following my battle for tenure with my alma mater, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And after I finally got my vote for tenure, I rejected it and came to Howard University instead, where I founded this center. And that was obviously a very intentional choice. I really believed that our profession had failed in how they covered a once in the history of a nation candidate called Donald Trump, and that they didn't seem to understand that the type of imbalance between the political parties meant you couldn't just cover what was happening politically as business as usual, as horse race politics of, he said, she said. So I wanted to really challenge this notion that journalism could be objective in the face of eroding democracy. That as a profession, we have to be pro-democracy because you can't exist. A free press cannot exist without democracy, and democracy cannot exist without a free press. So I wanted to come um, and help train future generations of journalists at historically Black colleges and universities, particularly because I believe that few groups, maybe none, understand um, the fallacy of American democracy better than Black Americans. And that experience is we didn't have it.
Mm.
Right. We did not
Mhm.
have it until 1965 with the passage of the Voting Rights Act. So Black Americans understand what this country is capable of. We understand that when people say this is the oldest continuing democracy in the world, that's not the truth. That in fact, we've only had multiracial democracy for 60 plus years. And that the only reason we have that is because of a enduring decades long freedom struggle and the violent suppression of that freedom struggle. So I understand that when our journalists are not being trained with that historical understanding, then they are covering politics um, without actually understanding what drives politics in this country and how those politics work. So that's what we're trying to do at the center is train um, HBCU students who study journalism in pro-democracy uh, historically informed journalism to say, we can look at what's happening in the country right now and see that our systems of checks and balances are failing. And that everything that we thought was enforceable was actually just some agreed upon rules. And as soon as you have a politician or a political party that doesn't agree on the rules anymore, then it all kind of falls apart. But that one kind of, as I have said, firewall remains the press. And we must be up to the job if this democracy is to be saved. And I'm not sure that it will be. But 1976, I was born in the bicentennial year. I was born as part of that first generation of Black Americans in the entire history of the United States who was born with full rights of citizenship. A decade before I was born, we were in the throes of the civil rights movement. Simply to have Black Americans be able to have the same rights as any other American a decade before I was born. And I feel a great responsibility to not lose what my ancestors allowed me to have, that I have to be in the fight for that. And so I just think that that is my role. That is as long as I have the ability to act, I have to be acting to preserve um, what was given to me and to repay that debt. And I see my work at Howard as doing that with the new generations of journalists.
And it's interesting, too, because your daughter is 15, ours
Yeah.
is 17. So, she is entering her senior year of high school. So we're starting that whole college, university, all of that. You mentioned earlier about the silence that's been happening a lot in these in colleges and universities. Now that your daughters, and this is to both of you all, because before you blink, she's going to be in college. You've done so much work transforming lower education system. Are you concerned about the climate of colleges and universities, and is that in any way informing your decision or her decision of where she's looking at going to school?
I mean, I'm certainly concerned, and both as a college faculty member, as someone who is reporting on the impacts of this administration on Black people and other marginalized groups across the country, and yeah, as a parent. Now, my dream has been for my child to go to Howard since she was 3 years old. So it was never, as far as I'm concerned, my intention was never that my daughter would go to a PWI. And I learned, as I'm sure you all know, as parents of a teenager, that if you want them to do something, you better stop talking about it. So
I call it ninja parenting. Like,
right.
just, yeah,
So
don't
I just
mention
started
it.
bringing her to Howard events. Brought her to homecoming last year, took her to the Legacy Classic, took her to my classes, and so far she also says she wants to go to Howard. So I'm hoping that she will be able to spend, her college years in that protective bubble of a HBCU. Not that they are a utopia, but I think particularly in this climate, and that's why we're seeing record enrollment at HBCUs across the country. It's so many Black parents who themselves were likely, among those first significant groups of people who went into those PWIs. I personally was scarred by my experience at Notre Dame. And that's why I really wanted my own daughter to go to a HBCU. And I think in this political climate where you're seeing, again, most elite schools that are shuttering their multicultural centers, that are ending their DEI practices, that I feel like that would be a very unwelcome environment. So I think a lot of Black parents are making similar choices for their kids. And I think this is a time where we as Black communities then really need to support and embrace our HBCUs and make sure that they are getting the proper funding to meet that need.
I remember our daughter having a conversation. She was like, I want to go to, and I'm not going to name the university, but it was a PW.
It also started with an H.
And and Nikole was like, I'm only paying for a HBCU.
So Nikole, that wasn't subtle at all.
No,
I was like, I'll support you wherever you go, but not financially. Okay.
in the beginning, I thought it was harsh, but what I really, really heard from it, I got a chance to process what that meant. I hope that knowing and seeing what our PWIs are doing in terms of, falling to their knees to the Trump administration, we see a benefit in ensuring that our Black kids are getting part of their quality education is the experience itself, and that the harm that is done when a Black child is isolated from their community and in such isolation to the point where they don't even see where they fit. And just because you enroll Black students doesn't mean that you created the environment for them to thrive. And so I believe that I went to a HBCU. My grandmother went to a HBCU. My family went to HBCUs. My grandfather. So I feel like it's very important, and I hope that our HBCUs do hear the call and meet that and meet that call as well. So I thought that by all means we work hard. Why not take that investment much higher and make sure that we investing in our HBCUs?
It's an incredibly important conversation, and one in which a lot of Black families are having right now.
Thank you for joining us. New episodes drop every Wednesday with bonus content every Thursday. Don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss a moment.